There's a hole in the ground at the edge of my woodpile, about the size of a quarter, and every evening around dusk they pour into it like water down a drain. Yellowjackets, disappearing underground where I can't spray them, can't burn them out without burning the hillside. My grandfather handled nests like this with nothing but a kettle and a stick, never once bought a can of spray. Most people reach for Raid and end up just making them angry. Stay with me, especially what happens the second night, because that's what most people skip. And subscribe. Here's everything. Now I know what this looks like. A man standing in his yard with a pot of boiling water, poking at a hole in the ground with a stick. I've heard the comments. Dumbest thing I've ever seen. Try a foam spray. Try a powder. Try that stuff that shoots 20 feet so you don't have to get close. And I'm not here to argue with you about spray cans on a paper nest hanging in a shrub. That's fine. Use whatever you want on a surface nest. But I'm talking about a deep Appalachian ground nest. One that's been building since late spring, maybe earlier. One where the main gallery runs 18 inches straight down before it starts branching sideways through the soil. You spray the entrance tunnel of a nest like that, and you kill the workers at the mouth. The queen is sitting another foot below them, unhurt, and she's already got eggs going. You've spent money, introduced chemicals into your garden soil, and you'll have a new problem in 4 to 6 weeks. My uncle tried gasoline once. This was back when everybody tried gasoline. He poured about a pint into a nest along his fence line, touched a match to it, and that patch of ground never grew right again. The soil chemistry was ruined for years, and the nest came back the following summer 3 feet to the left because he hadn't actually solved anything, he'd just scorched the entrance. Gasoline runs off downhill toward water. It's illegal to use near most waterways, and it doesn't penetrate a branching gallery system the way people think it does. Boiling water penetrates, it floods, it kills by heat all the way through the channels, and it leaves nothing behind in the soil. No residue, no fumes, no burned ground. The method looks dumb because it requires nothing impressive. That's exactly why it works. But you have to do it right, in the right order, at the right time. That's what I'm going to walk you through. Phase 1. Observation and timing. You do not start this job with a kettle. You start it by doing nothing, watching from about 10 feet out, at dusk on a calm evening. Most people who fail at this fail before they've picked up a single tool. Here's what I look for. First, traffic. Yellowjackets are ground foragers. They spend their days out hunting insects, scavenging protein, working the edges of the garden, and then they come home before dark. What you want to see is that return traffic. Workers coming in, not going out. If you're watching a steady inbound flow as the light fades, the colony is intact, the workers are consolidating inside, and the queen is deep. That's the condition you want to meet. Second, the entrance hole itself. Size, shape, and location. Is the soil around it disturbed? Has something been digging at it? A skunk or a raccoon working the nest overnight? A disturbed nest is an agitated nest. If the entrance looks freshly churned, wait a day before you do anything. You want them settled. Third, and this matters more than almost anything else, secondary holes. I've made this mistake myself. You pour into the primary entrance, and suddenly they're boiling up out of a second hole, 2 feet to the left, that you never noticed. Sit back, watch for 10 minutes at least, and look for any other spots where traffic is entering the ground nearby. Mark both holes with a stick if you find more than one. You'll be treating both simultaneously, or you're only doing half the job. Timing, dusk, not dark, dusk. If you can still make out the entrance hole without a flashlight, you're in the right window. The spray can instructions always say apply at night with a flashlight. I've never understood that. A flashlight beam and the vibration of your footsteps in the dark agitates them before you've done anything useful. Old-timers never brought light to this job. Your eyes adjust fine if you give them 10 minutes before you approach. One more thing on timing. Weather. Don't do this the evening before a cold front moves in. Yellowjackets get erratic when the barometric pressure drops, and the whole nest runs hotter and more defensive than usual. Pick a calm, dry evening. Still air, good light fading slowly, temperature just starting to drop. You'll know that kind of evening when you feel it. That's your night. Here's something I've thought about a lot over the years. Every hardware store I've ever walked into has an entire aisle devoted to Yellowjacket problems. Foam sprays, dusts, bait traps, plug traps, electronic repellers, freeze sprays that claim to kill on contact. I've bought most of them at one point or another, out of curiosity. Some work reasonably well on a surface nest. None of them solve a deep ground nest. What they do is manage the symptom. They kill what they reach and leave the rest untouched. The old approach to pests in these mountains wasn't product-based. It was knowledge-based. You learned enough about the animal, the insect, the problem. You understood its behavior well enough to use that behavior against it. Yellowjackets return to the nest at dusk because their biology demands it. They cannot navigate in the dark. The queen does not leave the deep gallery. The workers consolidate at predictable times. All of that is exploitable information, and it costs you nothing to know it. The two things you actually need for this job cost less than $1 combined. One of them is already in your kitchen. Phase 2. Tools and preparation. The tools are a large pot or kettle holding at least 2 gallons of water and a straight stick about 4 to 5 feet long, a dowel, a piece of conduit, a straight branch from the woodpile. That's the whole list. The 2-gallon minimum matters more than people expect. 1 gallon starts losing temperature the moment it leaves the stove, and by the time it's traveled a foot down an Appalachian soil column, it's warm rather than lethal. You need volume to sustain killing heat through the gallery system. 2 gallons maintains that temperature long enough to reach the lower chambers. If you're dealing with a large or mature colony, and I'll tell you how to estimate that shortly, boil a second pot and have it standing by. The stick is not a probe. You use it to clear and slightly widen the entrance mouth. 1 gentle insertion, 1 rotation, withdraw. 3 seconds. What you're doing is opening the funnel so that when the water comes, it goes straight down rather than sheeting sideways along the surface. That's all the stick is for. Clothing, long sleeves, long pants, and tuck your pants into your socks. This isn't a full bee-suit situation. You're going to be at the hole for 30 seconds and then walking away, but you don't want exposed ankles. More importantly, don't wear anything floral scented. No fabric softener with a flowery smell, no cologne, nothing that reads as a flower to a Yellowjacket. I wear the same flannel shirt every time I do this job. It doesn't smell like anything interesting, and that's the point. Here's the prep step people forget. Before you put the water on to boil, walk the approach path to the nest. Know exactly where your feet go, where you'll shift your grip if needed, where you step immediately after the pour. The ground may be uneven, there may be exposed roots. You will not have time to think about any of this once you have 2 gallons of boiling water in your hands. Walk it twice in daylight and know it by feel. Boil the water inside. Carry it out in a covered pot to hold the heat. From the moment you lift that pot off the stove to the moment the water hits the hole, you want to be inside 2 minutes. Any longer, and you've lost too many degrees at the surface of the water where it counts. No flashlight, you already know that. Phase 3, reading the nest one last time. You've got boiling water in your hand, and you're standing 10 feet from the hole. Do not pour yet. Take 60 seconds and look at the situation. Is there still traffic at the entrance? If yes, wait 5 more minutes. You want the last foragers inside. Is the entrance dry and clear, or does it look disturbed? A lawnmower passed too close today, a dog nosing around, a footstep that landed wrong. A disturbed nest is already alert and more likely to respond immediately when you pour. Come back tomorrow if something set them off today. Now look at the soil. Loose, sandy soil absorbs water fast and channels it sideways. If you're on sandy ground, pour slowly and steadily, almost a trickle at first, to let the soil direct the water down rather than spreading it flat at the surface. Clay soil is different. Appalachian red clay holds heat better than almost anything and slows absorption just enough to keep the water hot in the channel longer. If you're on clay, this method actually improves. The water sits in the gallery hot and long enough to do thorough damage. Crouch down and listen, not at the hole, from 3 feet out. A healthy, undisturbed ground nest on a still evening has a faint hum. Not loud, just a low vibration you can feel as much as hear. If you don't hear anything and you're not seeing traffic, you may have the wrong hole, or the nest may be late season and already diminished. Worth knowing before you carry out 2 gallons of boiling water. Traffic volume and entrance size give you a rough depth reading. A small hole with heavy inbound traffic is almost always a deep, mature colony. That's when you want the second pot. I've poured into what looked like a significant nest and found it was half empty. late season die-off, most workers already gone, and I've crouched over a hole the size of a quarter that turned out to be 3 feet of tunnel and a colony that was nowhere near finished. The nest tells you if you sit still long enough to listen. Before I tell you about the pour, let me say something about why we're doing this at all. Yellowjackets are not vermin by nature. They're predatory insects. They hunt caterpillars, beetles, flies, the kind of soft-bodied pests that damage a garden all summer long. A colony that's established itself 40 feet from your back door, up under the tree line, doing what it does. That's not your problem. Old-timers in these mountains didn't destroy every nest they found. They knew which ones created genuine danger and left the rest to do their work. The ones worth treating are specific. A nest within 10 feet of a door or a regular footpath. A nest expanding into a structure or a known allergy in the household. That last one, especially, a yellowjacket sting, is serious for an allergic person in a way that warrants no hesitation at all. The discrimination itself, knowing which nests to leave and which ones to handle, that's not softness, that's competence. The old-timers who taught me this didn't confuse respect with sentiment. They just didn't waste effort on a problem that wasn't one. If you've decided the nest needs to go, and if it's close to the house, it does. What follows is the part people get wrong most often, and it's not the pour itself. Phase 4, the execution. Walk to the nest calmly. No hurry, no hesitation once you're moving. Ground vibration is what sets them off more than almost anything else, and a person moving fast reads differently to a nest than a person walking at a normal pace. I know the difference in outcome. You walk like you own the place, because for the next 30 seconds, you do. Stick work first. One gentle insertion into the entrance hole. Rotate it once to open the mouth just slightly. Withdraw cleanly. 3 seconds. You're not probing for the gallery. You're opening the funnel so the water tracks straight down instead of fanning out at the surface. Set the stick aside and get the pot into position immediately. Pour steadily and directly into the hole. Not a splash, not a dump. A controlled, continuous stream aimed at the center of the opening. Tilt the pot slowly enough that the water goes down as a column, not a sheet across the ground. You're trying to fill the gallery from the top down, not flood the dirt around the entrance. With a 2-gallon pot at a controlled rate, you're going to be standing over that hole for about 20 to 30 seconds. That is a long time to stand over a yellowjacket nest. Your nerve is going to want to break somewhere around the 15-second mark. You hold it and you keep pouring. Within the first 5 to 10 seconds, you'll see movement. Workers in the upper tunnel will try to come out. Most won't be able to navigate upward against a steady column of boiling water. Some will emerge at the edges. This is expected and normal. It's not a sign the method is failing. Keep the stream going. When the pot is empty, set it down. Don't drop it. The noise and vibration follow you. And walk away from the nest. Crosswind if you can manage it. I go about 20 feet and then I turn around and watch. What you'll see? A handful of survivors circling the entrance, confused, finding no pheromone trail, no queen signal, nothing to return to. Steam rising from the hole if the evening is cool enough. Those survivors will disperse within a few hours. They have nothing to rebuild around. If you have a second pot, give the first water 3 minutes to work down through the channels, then repeat the pour. Same method, same pace. I don't pour back to back. I give the first water time to move through the gallery, then send the second wave into ground that's already been opened up. For a large, mature colony, that second pot is the difference between a successful treatment and a partial one. Most people stop here. They walk away thinking the job is done. Some of them are right. A lot of them find out a week later when they're still getting stung in the same spot. Phase 5. Verification and the second night. I mentioned the second night early on, and here's where it pays off. The workers that were out foraging when you poured, anywhere from a quarter to a third of the active colony on a productive evening, weren't in the nest when the boiling water came through. They are going to return the following evening at dusk because that is what they do. They come back to where the entrance was. They can't make sense of what happened. They mill around and investigate, and if there's a surviving reproductive female in that returning group, and late in the season there often is, And if the gallery still has viable structure that the water didn't fully flood, they will attempt to re-establish. The morning after the pour, walk past the entrance hole and observe from 10 feet. No activity means high success. Any incoming or outgoing traffic means there are survivors, and the nest was not fully eliminated. You treat it again that evening. Same procedure, same timing. The second pour is almost always a smaller job. Fewer workers, less gallery to deal with. And most nests do not survive 2 full treatments, but you have to go back and look. People pour on Tuesday evening, skip the check, and don't figure out something went wrong until they get stung on Sunday. By then, the colony has had 5 days to regroup around whatever survived. I had one nest, deep clay bank near an old root system from a fallen oak. The roots were channeling the first water sideways before it could penetrate the lower gallery. Took 3 nights on that one. Third night, I found a secondary entrance I'd missed entirely, tucked under a root lip about 18 inches from the primary hole. Treated both simultaneously. Had a neighbor hold the second pot. 3 nights, 2 gallons each, no chemicals, no damage to the hillside. That root system is still there. The ground grew back clean. Now, someone's going to ask, why not just use the spray? I'll answer that honestly. For a surface nest, a paper nest hanging in a shrub, an exposed nest under a deck board, anything you can actually see and hit directly, a pyrethrin spray works fine, and it's faster. I'm not arguing against it for that application. For a deep ground nest with a mature colony, here's what spray actually does. It reaches the entrance tunnel. It kills the workers in the upper section. The queen is in a brood chamber below the reach of the chemical, which dissipates in the gallery long before it reaches the lower chambers. You've introduced residue into your garden soil. Pyrethrin breaks down eventually, but not instantly, and it doesn't discriminate between yellowjackets and the earthworms and ground beetles doing useful work in that same soil. You've spent money, and you'll have a new colony in 4 to 6 weeks because the queen survived and kept laying. Boiling water isn't the natural choice in some philosophical sense. It's the mechanically correct choice for this specific problem. Heat floods a gallery the way a chemical cloud simply cannot. It doesn't require you to stand in the dark trying to aim a spray can into a hole you can barely see. Your grandfather didn't use boiling water because he couldn't afford the spray. He used it because he understood what he was actually trying to kill. Phase 6. Aftermath and ground sealing. The nest is gone. Now seal it. An empty nest cavity in Appalachian ground is a ready-made address. Yellowjacket scouts the following spring will find that cavity, detect the residual chemical markers left by the previous colony, and consider moving in. Not every time, but often enough that old-timers always filled the hole after treatment. This isn't superstition. Yellowjackets do return to previously occupied sites when conditions allow. Tamp soil into the entrance. Don't just cover it. Pack it down firmly with the heel of your boot until the opening is closed and the soil is solid. Then lay a flat stone or a board over the disturbed area and leave it for 2 to 3 weeks. The physical obstruction prevents new scouts from investigating even if the scent markers remain underneath. If you have diatomaceous earth on hand, work a tablespoon into the hole before you tamp the soil. Any stragglers that come back and try to re-enter get dusted. It's not a pesticide, it's a mechanical desiccant that damages the exoskeleton, and it won't harm the soil chemistry or the earthworms working nearby. If this nest was in a garden bed, the disturbed soil is actually in decent shape. Yellowjackets aerate the ground as they build. The colony was doing something useful down there, just not in a place you could tolerate. Till the spot lightly, work some compost in, and that bed will be fine by next season. 2 weeks out, walk past the site. No traffic, nothing emerging. You're done. If you see activity, the colony was not fully eliminated. Run the full process again, this time watching specifically for secondary entrances within 3 feet of the primary hole. They're easy to miss in low light. When I see that sealed patch of ground, the flat stone sitting over it, the work done, I think back to the moment that started it all, standing at the edge of the woodpile at dusk, watching that line of yellowjackets disappear into the ground. Most people see that and think about what product to buy. My grandfather looked at the same thing and thought about what time to come back. That distinction is everything. The dumbest method is a kettle of boiling water, a straight stick, and a man standing in his yard at the right hour knowing what to look for. No protective suit, no chemical cloud, no equipment beyond what's already on the stove. The people who call it dumb are the people people who have something to sell you. What this method actually represents is something older and more useful than any product: the habit of reading a situation accurately before you act on it. Watch first, understand what you're dealing with, apply the minimum effective force at the right moment, seal the work when it's done, and check it afterward. That approach works on a yellowjacket nest. It works on most problems a man runs into on a mountain. The old knowledge in these hills wasn't a collection of tips. It was a way of paying attention to timing, to behavior, to what the land was telling you before you made your move. The kettle is just the last step in a process that started the evening before, when you crouched 10 feet from that hole and counted the traffic coming home. Next time you find a ground nest close to the house, don't reach for anything for the first 2 evenings. Watch. Find the primary hole. Find the secondary holes. Count the traffic. Listen for the hum. Learn what you're actually dealing with before you do a single thing. That watching is the method. Everything else is just hot water. Tell me in the comments what your family used on ground nests. I'd genuinely like to know what got passed down where you are. This came from one part of these mountains, and I know other hollows had their own ways of handling it. Knowledge like this doesn't need a battery. It doesn't expire on a shelf. And it'll still work the evening the hardware store is an hour away and already closed.